The evening sun was sinking low over the dusty horizon, its golden rays stretching across the wide prairie as though reluctant to leave the land in the hands of darkness. And in the little town of Red Rock, whispers had turned into shouts and shouts into orders, as a gathering of men forced their way toward a modest homestead at the edge of town, where a frightened young girl clung to the porch railing, her tear-streaked face catching the last of the light. Her name was Clara, barely 19. Her dreams larger than the skies above, but shackled by a cruel bargain her own kin had made, for her father, weak with debts and greed, had promised her to a man twice her age, a rancher known not for kindness but for fists. And that evening the men had come to collect her, declaring the marriage would happen whether she willed it or not, their rough boots kicking up dust as they advanced, their words sharp, their laughter mocking. But just as the girl's cries rang out against the encroaching night, a sound split the stillness that made even the most hardened of them pause. The echoing click of a rifle being cocked, a sound that spoke of certainty, of finality, of a man who did not bluff. And from the shadows of the trail leading into town rode a figure both weary and unyielding, a cowboy astride a black horse whose hooves struck the earth like thunder, his broad hat pulled low, his jaw set like stone, his name murmured by some, cursed by others, Cole Maddox, a drifter, a man with no family but the trail, no allegiance but to justice as he saw it. And in that moment his piercing eyes caught Clara's, not with pity but with promise, a silent vow that no force of men or money would see her chained to a life she did not choose. The mob jeered at first, mocking the lone rider, telling him to mind his business, reminding him this was a matter of family and honor. But Cole's rifle lifted steady, the barrel glinting beneath the last shred of sunlight, his voice low but carrying the weight of a storm, as he told them plainly that honor was not found in shackles, that family was not built on fear, that a woman's heart was not a prize to be traded like cattle. And though his words were calm, every man present felt the danger in them, for this was not a cowboy speaking to bargain. This was a man who had seen the ugly face of cruelty before and would not watch it claim another soul if he could help it. Clara's father sputtered, his hands trembling as he pointed toward his daughter, declaring she was his to give, his property, his decision. But Cole cut him off with a stare that stripped the man of pretense, reminding him that no man owns another, least of all his own blood. And when one of the would-be groom's henchmen stepped forward, hand reaching for his revolver, Cole fired into the dirt at his boots, the blast scattering dust and courage alike, the crack reverberating off the wooden storefronts of Red Rock, until even the saloon doors swung with the echo. Silence followed, thick and heavy, broken only by the ragged breathing of Clara, who for the first time felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. And with a slow, deliberate motion, Cole swung down from his horse, the long coat draping his tall frame as he extended a hand toward her, not as a command but as a choice, his gaze never leaving hers, telling her without words that this was her decision, that freedom lay in the courage to take it. And after a heartbeat that seemed eternal, Clara stepped forward, her small hand sliding into his, the rough calluses of his palm somehow steadying her trembling, and the crowd roared with protest, shouting that she was bound by promise, by law, by duty. But Cole raised his rifle again and declared with a voice that carried like rolling thunder across the plains that she was bound by nothing but her own heart, and that if any man wished to test that truth, he would meet them barrel first. None moved, for though they outnumbered him, they saw in his stance the resolve of a man who had nothing to lose and everything to defend, a kind of courage that makes others falter. And slowly, one by one, they began to back away, their bravado shrinking with the shadows, until only Clara's father remained, his lips curling in anger, yet his body too weak to resist. And at last, with a muttered curse, he turned his face from her, disowning her in the same breath. But Clara no longer wept, for she had chosen her own path. And as Cole led her toward his horse, lifting her gently into the saddle before mounting behind her, he whispered low enough for her ears alone that no one would lay claim to her but herself, that she was free, though if she wished she could ride with him. And when she looked back once more at the life she had known, the shack, the debts, the broken promises, she chose the unknown, resting her head lightly against the chest of the cowboy, who had risked all to give her a choice. They rode out beneath the vast starlit sky, the wind carrying away the shouts of the town, And though Clara's heart pounded with fear of what tomorrow might hold, it also swelled with a strange, unshakable hope. For in the strength of that cowboy's arms and the fire in his eyes, she felt not just protection but possibility. A life beyond cages. A chance to be more than a pawn in another man's game. And as the prairie stretched wide before them, Cole Maddox knew this was just the beginning. That danger would follow. That the men they had defied would not forget. But for tonight, as the firelight of a small camp crackled and Clara wrapped herself in his spare coat, freedom had been won and no force of greed or cruelty could take it from her again. And so, dear listener, if you believe in stories where courage breaks, chains and love is not given but chosen, where the weak are defended by the strong and every woman has the right to her own destiny, then let this tale stay with you. Let it inspire you to fight for what is just, and if you wish to ride with us again through more tales of grit, heart, and the wild frontier, do not forget to subscribe to this channel, for many more stories of courage and hope await you on this trail. The dawn broke soft and pink across the prairie, painting the endless horizon with strokes of fire and promise. And Clara stirred beneath the heavy wool coat that had kept her warm through the night, her breath rising in little clouds as the morning air kissed her cheeks. And when she opened her eyes, she found Cole Maddox already awake. Crouched by the fire, his rifle across his knees, his gaze steady on the distance as though he could read the land like a book, every shadow, every whisper of wind assigned to him. He had not slept much, perhaps not at all, but his presence was as solid as the earth itself, a sentinel who had watched over her while the rest of the world spun uncaring. For a moment Clara did not speak, simply studying the man who had turned her life upside down in a single night. And though his face was weathered by sun and sorrow, there was something in the hard line of his jaw and the way he sat so still that gave her a sense of safety stronger than any walls could provide. And yet behind that strength, she sensed a loneliness, the kind that comes from years of drifting without roots, without anyone to call one's own. She drew the coat tighter and her voice, still hoarse from yesterday's cries, broke the silence as she asked softly what would happen now. And Cole's eyes flickered to her, not unkind, but with a weight that told her he did not offer illusions. He explained that the men from Red Rock would not let the insult rest, that the wealthy rancher she had been promised to was not a man to swallow humiliation quietly, and that by now, riders would already be saddling their horses to come after them, not for love or for family, but for pride, for ownership, for the need to prove that no one could stand against them. Clara's heart stuttered, fear rising again, but Cole's voice steadied her, low and firm, as he said that running was not the same as hiding, that they would ride smart, ride far, and that as long as he drew breath, no man would put chains on her life. With those words, Clara felt both the weight of danger and the strange freedom of it. She was no longer a prisoner of her father's debts, but freedom came with a price, and now she must choose every day to be brave enough to claim it. Cole saddled the black horse with practiced ease, lifting Clara onto the saddle before him, and as the sun climbed higher, they rode out into the open plains, the tall grass swaying like an ocean around them, the sky so wide it made Clara's fears feel both small and infinite. Hours passed, and with each mile the bond between them grew in quiet ways. The way Cole adjusted his pace to spare her comfort, the way Clara leaned into his chest when the wind grew sharp, the way neither needed to speak to feel the presence of the other. But as the day stretched on, the sound of hooves carried, faintly on the wind, a rhythm, too many to be wild mustangs, and Cole's shoulders tensed. He guided the horse off the open trail and into the shelter of rocky ridges, moving swift and sure, every decision calculated to buy them distance. Clara clung tighter, her heartbeat echoing the horse's gallop, and for the first time she whispered if he regretted saving her, if the burden she had brought was too heavy. But Cole's reply came without hesitation. He told her that some burdens were worth carrying, and that freedom, once won, was never too heavy to bear. His words wrapped around her like armor, but soon gunshots cracked across the ridges, bullets sparking off stone, the pursuers too close for comfort, and Cole urged the horse harder, weaving through narrow passes, his rifle always within reach, his body shielding hers from the danger behind. The chase stretched into dusk, until at last they reached a canyon where the cliffs rose steep and wild, and Cole dismounted, pulling Clara with him, his sharp eyes scanning the terrain as he led the horse along a hidden path known only to men who had wandered more years. than they could count. They found a hollow, a small cave tucked into the cliffside, and there they rested, listening as the thunder of hooves passed above them. The pursuers fooled for now, though Cole knew they would circle back, relentless until pride was satisfied. In the dim light of the cave, Clara trembled, not only from fear but from the enormity of all she had lost and all she stood to gain. And Cole, though not a man of many words, sat beside her, his hand resting lightly on hers, not to claim but to anchor, to remind her she was not alone. That night, as the fire crackled low, Clara asked him why he had chosen to stand for her, a stranger, when he could have ridden past and spared himself the danger, and Cole stared into the flames for a long moment before answering, his voice rough with memory that once, long ago, there had been someone he loved, a sister with eyes bright as hers who had not been saved, who had been given away like property while he was too young, too powerless to stop it, and that ever since, he had carried that failure like a stone in his chest, swearing never again to turn his back when he saw injustice. Clara's heart ached at his words, seeing now the truth behind his fierce resolve, and she whispered that perhaps saving her was not only her freedom but his redemption too. For the first time, Cole smiled, faint but real, and in that moment the bond between them deepened into something neither could yet name, but both could feel, a promise not of ownership but of choice, of partnership in a world that had shown them little kindness. Yet even as warmth blossomed between them, Cole's eyes grew wary again, for he knew the chase was not over, that the men of Red Rock would not rest, and that soon enough he would have to raise his rifle again to defend what he had claimed, not a possession but a truth, that every soul deserved the right to be free. As the night stretched long and the stars burned bright above the canyon, Clara leaned against him, her head resting against his shoulder, and whispered that she did not fear as long as he was near. And though Cole did not reply, the tightening of his arm around her was answer enough. They slept lightly, dreamers in a storm, knowing tomorrow the fight would find them again. But for tonight, courage and hope kept them warm. And so, dear listener, if this story of grit, courage, and a love born in the fire of freedom stirs your heart, then ride with us further down this trail. For the story is far from done, and the battles yet to come will test their bond in ways neither can yet imagine. Do not forget to subscribe to this channel so you never miss the next chapter of Clara and Cole's journey, where love, danger, and destiny ride side by side across the wide, untamed West.